Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is Suspects and Spirits, and I'm your host, Taylor Seraphin. And it has been raining all day here. It's also Friday. Hallelujah. I got some spooky, cozy vibes going on with the rain, the ambiance. It's hitting just right for me. It's a 10 for sure. The weather is weathering today. It's also very late. It is currently 10:19 p.m. I've been up since 4:15 a.m., so please excuse me if I sound kooky and tired or if the vocal cords are more gravelly than usual. I didn't eat glass before recording this evening. I just can't remember what sleep feels like. So I'm very, very tired, in fact. But this needs to get done because somehow I managed to double book myself for 2 birthday parties this weekend for my daughter's friends, which I love her friends, so I don't mind at all. More birthday parties, the better. Like, let's celebrate everybody. And I always try to go to as many birthday parties as we can because those are special memories for, the birthday kids. And I always want them to feel important and special. So I love going. I just completely mismanaged my time this week. I thought one of the parties was last weekend. So there I was on Sunday thinking I had all these other things I needed to do before going to this party. And then I was like, oh my gosh, that's not today. That's weird. This says 28th and that says 21st, and that I have the days wrong. So everything has been thrown off. I'm completely off schedule and I'm thriving. You guys just thriving, you know. But the rain is awesome. The rain is great. I did not enjoy all the indoor recess that came with it, all the inside shenanigans, but what can you do? I mean, kids got to play, right? They got to play. I do have some thoughts, though, about this trend that's happening with our youth, specifically in the classroom. Well, I guess really just everywhere, it seems. Listen, you guys, I cannot get through a math lesson without kids going 6, 7. The math gods had it out for me yesterday. I had 2 answers back to back during our lesson where the answer was 67. And I did not do that on purpose. Okay. Sometimes I do. This time I did not. And it was just chaos, pure chaos. I actually had to ask my 13-year-old, like, what is this trend? And should the littles even know what this is? Like, is it appropriate? And she just laughed and she told me what it was. And I was like, oh, well, that's a choice. Wow. But then I thought back to my days of watching old Greg and the shoes video and, let's get them shoes. And I also thought about Jenna Marbles and I was like, okay, I get it. I get it. It's annoying as a teacher, but I'm sure my parents and our teachers were like so annoyed with us quoting all of those videos. So I can't even tell you how many times I asked a teacher if they drank Bailey's from a shoe and saying to my friends, do you love me? Do you think you could ever love me? So I guess this is just karma. We also used to sing that Snape, Snape, Severus Snape. I don't know why, but it was a different time. It was a real different time. I was telling my daughter about how I grew up, during the height of YouTube. That was like the thing. We would have sleepovers and we would just stay up all night in the computer room watching YouTube videos, like just stupid YouTube videos. One time my friends and I actually made a YouTube video. I don't even know if it's still available. If it's out there, I need to scrub it from the internet. uh yeah, I don't even know if I should say what it is. You know what? Whatever. We were dancing to I Want Candy by Aaron Carter. Listen, this was like in high school. That song came out when we were real itty bitty babes. Fun fact, Aaron Carter was my first concert. I was like 8. But we danced to that song at my house, like with my dog. And one of my friends was dressed up as Harry Potter. I was dressed up as a boy. I had a beanie on. My hair was like tucked into the beanie. I had backup dancers. I don't know. It was real interesting. But, that's what we used to do. That's what we did for sleepovers. So now kids are just, looking at memes and going 6, 7. So I get it. It's cool to be weird. And you should always be weird. Teaching is so weird, dude. It's like, what do you mean I went to college to tell a kid to stop licking their pencil or surfing on the legs of their chair? Like, they will flip their chair upside down and try to surf on, like, the legs of them, and I'm like, What are you doing? I'm not trying to call the ER today. I do not wanna have to make that phone call, and I don't wanna have to fill out the paperwork. Please just sit down." Like, I'm in debt for that. I'm in debt to tell kids to stop picking their noses and get their hands out of their pants. Like, go wash your hands. That's why I'm in debt, you guys. And I love it most days. Most days it's really wonderful, but there is absolutely nothing that will prepare you for this job, not even parenting, really. Like nothing. As far as academics go, sure, college is helpful. I loved college. I love my classes. I nerded out so hard. But the rest of this stuff, just nothing will prepare you. We have breaks though, which are definitely needed. I had a friend recently ask me, she was like, "Didn't you guys just have a few days off in September?" And I was like, "Yeah, well, we had Friday off. We had meetings all day Friday, and then we had Monday off for Labor Day. Now we have fall break coming up." And she was like, "Wow, do you even go to school?" I'm like, "Listen, spend one day in my classroom, one day. See how you feel at the end of the day, and then tell me you don't need multiple breaks throughout the school year." But yeah, we do. We have fall break coming up, and you know what that means? You know what that means? Pumpkin patch, baby. I'm gonna pumpkin patch so hard you don't even understand. Those pumpkins, they don't want to see me coming. No, they don't. Or maybe they do. Maybe they like being carved up. I don't know what they like, but I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna find the biggest pumpkin I can, and I'm gonna carve the shit out of it and drink apple cider and watch scary movies. And I'm gonna fall break so hard. So that's awesome. But what's not awesome, and what I'm not delighted to tell you, is the story today. It is very, very tragic, very awful, as they all are. Hi, welcome to my podcast where we talk about murder. It is all tragic. And as promised, this is Halloween themed. And although it didn't happen on Halloween night specifically, it was very, very close to Halloween. So, Halloween adjacent. So let's get into it. Let's set the scene. It was late October, just a few days before Halloween 2014. Drivers were passing through Farmingdale, New York, and their cars were slowing down at a very strange sight. There in the road is what looked like a limp body and a severed head only a few feet away. At first, passersby thought it was some kind of prank, a prop, just someone trying to get a good scare out of the neighborhood. Some neighbors at first thought it was a mannequin. And guys, what do we always say about that? It's never a mannequin, right? Even this close to Halloween, it's just not. That's not what it is. Aunt Karen and Aunt Georgia taught us that is not what it is ever. And sure enough, as more and more people approached the scene under the dim of the streetlight, neighbors slowly grew more concerned. So concerned, in fact, that the police were dispatched to the neighborhood. One witness told reporters, quote, "It looked too staged, too fake. I didn't want to believe it was real," end quote. Another admitted that he actually drove past it without stopping because, well, it was October and people do strange things with their decorations around Halloween. I mean, listen, I go all out. I have never put a severed head and body parts on my lawn. I've never done that. So, while I can see why you might think that it's just really elaborate decor, that's pretty dark. It's pretty dark for a neighborhood, right? I don't know. People do weird shit. But as sirens cut through the crisp autumn night and law enforcement arrived, the worst had been confirmed. This wasn't a decoration or even a tasteless prank. This was a real person. It was the body of a 66-year-old woman, a beloved college professor, mother, sister, and neighbor. She had been murdered, decapitated, and dragged from her home into the quiet suburban street. And the man who killed her wasn't a stranger. He wasn't some random cult figure or a shadowy intruder. It was someone she knew very, very well. This is the gruesome story of the murder of Patricia Ward. Patricia was a college professor, a woman who had dedicated decades of her life to teaching languages at Farmingdale State College. Colleagues described her as warm, devoted, and endlessly patient, saying, quote, "She cared about every student, no matter how they were doing in her class," end quote. One former student recalled, "Patricia wasn't just a teacher. She was the kind of professor who left an impression. the one students remembered years later. And that's why what happened on October 28th, 2014 was just so unthinkable. Patricia Ward had no enemies. She lived very quietly in Farmingdale, and for nearly 30 years, she taught language arts and basic literacy at Farmingdale State's Educational Opportunity Center. Her students weren't always traditional. They were often adults, people who had struggled, and she was known for having a soft voice and a tough place. Someone who believed that education could change a life, which I love that about her because it really can. We never stop learning. So, I think education and intelligence is like one of the best weapons you can have, honestly. It can save you in a lot of different ways. A wonderful thing that a lot of us, I think, take for granted. So I love that about Patricia. Her siblings remember that Patricia always had a warm, welcoming house. She had sisters and brothers, and even though they weren't really in the news and in the limelight during all of this, she did have one sister who said in a local paper, quote, Patricia was someone who believed people had untapped potential, end quote. Friends said that Patricia's life revolved around her students and her son. She had no large marriages, no flashy social life, just a daily devotion to her classroom and home. She lived with her son Derek in a very modest apartment. Neighbors recalled often seeing her running errands, carrying groceries in and out of the apartment, and also just stopping to chat every once in a while. A typical neighbor. And Patricia had taught possibly hundreds of students who later spoke of her as one who pushed them to try and to believe in themselves, which is truly so powerful and just a testament to what kind of person and what kind of teacher she really was. Now, Patricia loved her son fiercely. Her son's name was Derek, and he was 35 years old in October of 2014 when all of this happened. To the world, he was just Patricia's son. And to some, he was a man who had floundered a bit. He'd had brushes with the law, struggles with mental health, and moments of crisis that no one really knew how to handle. Derek had had a psychiatric history. He had been hospitalized in mental health facilities 2 months before the killing of his mother, but he had been discharged. Neighbors and family said in interviews that he had struggled for years, not steadily stable, sometimes very, very erratic, which was hard for Patricia because she loved her son dearly and wanted to protect him from both the world and himself. But despite Patricia's best efforts and positive influence, Derek had many legal troubles. Things like arrests for drug and gun possession were part of his record. Whether they represented danger to others or simply just personal missteps, they were definitely signs. Family members later said he'd been trying to stay clean, trying to get help, but help, it seemed, wasn't enough, or maybe it just was intermittent. Just 2 months before the horrific night of October 28th, 2014, Derek had been discharged from psychiatric care. Details about the incident or reasoning for what prompted that hospitalization are very scarce, obviously, for legal reasons. The diagnosis, the medication, doctor's judgments, they're not released to the public, right? We don't have access to that. But family and police indicated that he was quite unstable and that something within him had just been deteriorating over time. Some speculate that it was grief, possibly, maybe failure of support structures. It was hard to say exactly, but what was clear was that a year earlier, there had been a death in the family, a paternal relative, that seemed to send Derek into a tailspin. Mourning, loss, guilt, unanswered questions, any of these can exacerbate existing mental illness. And some who knew Derek said that after this loss, he completely changed. He got quieter, he was more withdrawn and more volatile, which is never good. Neighbors reportedly would hear arguments between Derek and Patricia, or they would see Derek pacing in the apartment or just outside of it. Patricia would sometimes leave and then return with groceries, mail, or coffee, little rituals repeated, very simple. But over time, those rituals and those walks became fewer and fewer, almost like she was hesitant to leave the house too often when her son was home. Neighbors had mentioned that the apartment began looking very unkempt, but nobody expected what came next. On that Tuesday evening, October 28th, 2014, it is assumed that Patricia Ward was at home with her son, Derek. The timeline of events is not crystal clear, it's a tiny bit blurry, but what we do know is this. At some point inside the apartment, Derek, Patricia's son, attacked his mother with a knife. And what he did to his own mother was just brutal, absolutely brutal. When Patricia's body was discovered, there were multiple stab wounds. The exact number is not public, but police confirmed the reports. And not only did he stab her multiple times, Patricia had also been decapitated. I just want to point out that this is very personal. This is, obviously there's some mental health struggles here, but typically stabbings and stranglings, things like that, usually there's a lot of underlying resentment happening. Just from what I have learned. Again, I'm not a professional, but from what I understand, from what I have learned in all my years of watching true crime and reading about it and all of that, all the psychology classes I've taken, it's a very personal thing. Now, when police arrived, the apartment was sealed and a knife was recovered inside. Forensics cataloged blood, fingerprints, and all the markers of a violent act. Outside, they found Patricia's severed body and her head. There were sheets up to cover the scene, and neighbors were crying and completely traumatized. The town was just in complete shock. Lieutenant John Azada of Nassau County Police said that Derek had a history of psychiatric problems and that there was no indication of terrorism, meaning that the motive, as far as police would publicly concede, was likely just mental illness. Basically, he may not have known what he was doing. He could have been in some kind of psychosis. But it was hard to say because Derek was nowhere to be found. So, of course, speculation quickly began to fill the silence. Had Derek been off his medications? Had he stopped therapy? Did he feel abandoned or betrayed by the system? Some in the community whispered that Patricia, as devoted as she was, may have just reached a breaking point too, meaning she was beginning to feel the relentless strain of, caring for an adult son with a collapsing stability. Now, no public account confirms that at all, but this is the kind of thing that people begin to wonder because in tragedy, people look for meaning. And it would also make sense. I mean, of course, you love your children and you want to protect them always, but it sounds like Derek had some very, very serious mental health issues going on. And since he was an adult, there was only so much Patricia could do. So yeah, I can imagine that might be very exhausting because you love your kids, but at some point there's only so much you can do. After listening to witness testimony about who Patricia had been last seen with, law enforcement became more and more convinced that Patricia's body was horrendously severed by her son. It is believed that after dismembering her, Derek emerged to the stairwell, carrying the body down from the apartment unit. Forensics point to the idea that Derek dragged Patricia out of the building and placed her on the sidewalk. He then also carried her head, laying it on the pavement outside. So, of course, witnesses would walk by and see a body and what appeared to be a severed head. Some say that Derek even kicked the head or moved it. One report said that a neighbor specifically mentioned Derek kicked the head about 20 feet. Now, I don't know if that's true. I have no idea. I was not there. I am just saying that is what a neighbor said they saw. It's also a little bit strange to me that he would put her body out on display like that. Typically, in cases of psychosis, and again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a professional, just from what I've seen, a lot of the times in cases of psychosis like that specifically, they're not staging the body. But I could be wrong. If you guys know of any cases where that happened or you happen to work in mental health, let me know if you've ever seen anything like that. I found that a little strange. Could have been a multitude of things if he was suffering from mental illness. I mean, typically people do things like that for shock factor, right? Like they want to startle people. I don't know. Again, I wasn't there. I'm just speculating. trying to make sense of something that just doesn't make sense. So, meanwhile, as investigators were also trying to make sense of the scene, trying to figure out where Derek could be, there was a train coming through on the Long Island Railroad about a half mile away from where Patricia's body had been found. The train was barreling past at high speed, and that is when a man, later identified as Derek Ward, stepped in front of it, resulting in instant death. It is believed that all of this happened within a very short time frame. The killing, the mutilation of the body, and the suicide. Uh, it's all so heinous and sickening. One witness who was driving through the neighborhood said, quote, "My driver got startled and pointed, and there was a head. And I looked to the left, and there was a body. I was hoping it might have been a Halloween prank." End quote. The scene was just horrific. It was visceral, yet initially met with disbelief. I mean, how could you wrap your head around something like that? I could never. Halloween lights and props were everywhere. So, of course, in the moment, the context gave people pause. I mean, thank goodness that people paid closer attention and didn't dismiss it as an elaborate prank. I mean, my God, could you imagine? In the end, Patricia's family was completely devastated at the news of her murder and, of course, at who had done it. There were very mixed feelings of anger, confusion, sadness, and just desperation for answers. Unfortunately, other than forensics and a history of mental health issues, because Derek had taken his own life, the family had very little to go on for reasoning. They held a joint wake for Patricia and Derek. I would have such a hard time with this situation. It's all unimaginable. I'm not going to comment too much on this part because I can't imagine being put in that situation, and I hope none of us ever have to be. Now, even though they held the joint wake for Patricia and Derek, the grief was quite impossible for them to separate. And I mean, how do you make sense of that or even attempt to understand it? So I completely get it. That would be very difficult to separate. Farmingdale State College issued statements mourning Patricia, saying she was, quote, well known, well liked, and well respected, end quote. Students lined up to sign memorial books, flowers were laid out outside her apartment building, candles flickered in the moonlight in her honor, and discussions of her legacy and memories shared of Patricia overflowed the community. The case was closed as a murder-suicide, and evidence has been gathered. Statements were taken, and investigators and law enforcement did all they could. Because Derek died, there was no trial, no public mental health evaluation released in full, no extended interrogation of motive beyond initial police statements. And when we push beyond what we actually know, what emerges are some very, very uncomfortable questions, but I think that they're necessary. Like what happens when psychiatric care is discontinuous or when someone is discharged but underlying instability remains. Was Derek's discharge too soon? Did caretakers believe he was better than he was? I mean, what happened here? What level of monitoring or community support was in place for Patricia as well? Did she have support? What strain does long-term caregiving place on someone so devoted and loving? I'm very curious to know as well if did any neighbors or other families see warning signs that could have been acted on, like anything specific? Sometimes people see parts of a warning, but not the whole picture, and often only after the tragedy. I mean, they say hindsight's 2020, right? But I'm wondering if there was something before that could have been prevented. And Halloween itself, I mean, for this to occur around that time with the culture of fear, the decor of fake horror and satanic panic of all kinds, because satanic panic, I'm sorry to tell you, it has never really gone away. Some people really still believe in that stuff. Or did this make real horror less likely to be believed at first? Because of when it happened? I mean, it seems so. If this had happened another month, would someone have recognized sooner? I would hope so. And in a way, I mean, thank goodness that the body had been outside just a few nights before Halloween and not inside. If the display had been inside, would the discovery have been delayed? I mean, probably. Who knows? Who knows how long she could have been in there? The holiday timing certainly magnified the grotesque irony, but it also helped get Patricia the proper services that she deserved and also allowed us to gain insight for how truly important mental health care really is. And in terms of motive, I mean, beyond mental illness, there's possibility of specific triggers. There was that recent grief, loss, sense of failure, resentment, or guilt, but we don't have confirmation on any single trigger. We can't say that definitively. So, I mean, all we really do know is that it's awful. Patricia's family continues to remember her as a teacher, a sister, a mother. Some retrospective articles revisit the case on Halloween's top creepy true crime lists, but others use it as a cautionary tale about gaps in mental health care, which I think is probably the most important lesson here. In the end, this story is very much without a tidy closure, and what remains is just grief and haunting images, traumatized neighbors, the horror of a body mistaken for a Halloween prop. I mean, oh my God, awful, just nightmare. It is just insane to think that this story is real. It's a warning about what happens when people slip through the cracks, when psychiatric care fails, when family love collides with personal collapse. Ah, cruelty often arrives in disbelief. It arrives when we assume horror is make believe. So may this story force us to see things a bit more clearly. Well, you guys, that was the very devastating, very sad story of the murder of Patricia Ward. It is so hard to transition out of these things. This is a really dark one, but I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope that I did this case some justice. I personally had never heard of this case before I read this. So this one, my flabbers are gasted again. Never ceases to amaze me what humans can do to each other. But you are all awesome humans. All of you guys listening, I know you're awesome humans because you wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you weren't. So, well, I would hope. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, your evening, your laundry, your wine, whatever it may be. Enjoy yourselves. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Go follow the podcast wherever you follow things. And if you see a Halloween prop that looks really realistic, just make sure that it's actually a prop. Just double check. Halloween's coming up. Lots of crazy shit happening right now in the world. So if you see something that doesn't look right, look into it and then say something. Better safe than sorry. And with that, I leave you. Okay. As always, my friends, remember to trust your lizard brain. Until next time, goodbye.